Joanna, with HM Land Registry rolling out mandatory digital checks, including API deed matching and AI tools by 2026, how should conveyancers adapt their post-completion processes, do you think?
This is actually going to be quite a multi-layered process. I think, first of all, what might be really worth is just taking a step back to expand on what Roger has said earlier, just to give everybody a little bit of a better understanding of what is exactly the change that is coming. So first of all, as Roger has said, depending on how you lodge your AP1 submissions, you will actually see different things. So maybe if you're lodging directly on the portal, there may not be such a big shift immediately. For those customers who either are integrated directly with the Land Reg at the moment, or perhaps people like our customers who use our platform to lodge the digital AP1s, first of all, there will be a technical project. So all of the integrators will actually connect with the Land Registry through that magic channel that we call Business Gateway. We are going to have to migrate onto completely new APIs. So naturally, as part of this sort of like technical project, I'm pretty sure other providers will be doing similar things. We've definitely been very busy talking to our customers already to actually really visit some of the practice points in terms of their existing experience lodging digital AP1s, to be able to see, has the practice changed? Is there anything that we can do differently on our platform to actually ease that journey for them? So that's the sort of like what I call the technical project, essentially. But most importantly, from the law firm's perspective, there will be a much more tangible change for them coming. Again, both changes are earmarked towards October 2026. And that deed matching that we've already started talking about, it's basically about using the data that you will be completing or entering naturally in your digital AP1 form with the documents that are being submitted. So that will be your transfers, for example, or mortgage deeds. And what's important to know is that we will be using technology, which will be AI supported, to actually do these checking of the data at the point of submission. And what it really means in practical terms for the law firms is that if there are avoidable clear errors with the sort of like application makeup, your submission is not actually going to get through to the Land Registry. It's going to get stopped at the entry point. And this is really probably the most key thing for people to appreciate now, that where currently if your application has got some errors, you must still be able to lodge it. And you kind of like fix the errors once the submission has gone through. That's not going to be the case moving forward with those sort of like defined simpler errors. So actually the biggest shift here is moving that quality assurance process to much earlier in the process. And I think Simon touched on it earlier as well, that actually it's not just part of the actual post-completion process where your file is being handed over to the post-completion team most often. Here's the sort of like suite of documents, lodge it at the Land Reg, let me know what the ABR number will be, which is the HMLR reference. That's not going to be the case. Now the sort of like the workflow is going to have to change, because those assurance checks will have to happen much earlier in the process. So the post-completion teams actually get better quality of documentation that gets fed into them, so they can work off accurate data and accurate documentation for the lodgement.
Has anybody got any comments on what Joanna has just said?
I think everything Joanna said, I think, is perfectly correct. I think what I'm hoping for, and I think what will be really interesting to see, this should promote, these changes should promote better working practices, you know, in data quality, data integrity, even just going sort of towards the start of a conveyancing transaction, less inquiries to be raised, quicker transactions, is, I think, really what I'm hoping to see from these changes. That those better working practices and better standards that we have, that we can always improve on as an industry.
Yeah,
So you don't think by, if I'm listening to this correctly, understanding it correctly, getting all your ducks in a row earlier, and I'm not saying they're not in a row now, but they are normally, will that delay exchange in any way, do you think?
It shouldn't do. I think as long as everyone's on the same page, which is somewhat difficult occasionally conveyancing. Everyone has different views. Especially if you are dealing with, and we're maybe talking several years down the line once this has really kicked in from the Land Registry, the data is more reliable. Those entries on titles are clearer. For instance, obviously the work that's being done around easements and things at the moment should, I believe, lead to quicker transactions. Is my hope. We wait to see, obviously, but.
I think just to add to what Simon was saying, I think at the moment, Rob, what we're talking about is sort of where in the transaction are we losing time from? So if you're spending more time up front, getting everything together so that once it comes to the post-completion teams, they're able to submit first time, you're saving time there. But actually, what we're seeing at the moment is that once the file is handed over to the post-completion team, I'd say on average 20 to 30% are submittable first time, which is, obviously that's our experience of working with the clients we work with, but that's a very low number, right? So, if you can speed things up, getting all of those documents together and then find the efficiencies towards the end of the transaction process, i.e. when it gets to the post-completion teams, I think there's savings to be made in terms of time, actually.
I suppose we probably need to also change the way we talk about the transaction times, because I think the natural tendency is to talk about, let's say, from when the property goes on the market to when it actually completes. But we know from the conveyancing perspective, the completion is not when the transaction stops. This post-completion process carries on. And actually, if we are aiming to reduce the effort that goes into, let's say, fixing mistakes that are actually delaying requisitions, then yes, in that context, the transaction timeline will absolutely go down because the accuracy will naturally have to increase somewhere in the process. Are we going to see some tangible sort of like improvements, let's say, before exchange or before completion? Maybe not, because at the moment I think that the kind of like the pain point is once the completion has happened and we're not necessarily tracking how much time we are naturally spending from completion to actually the completed registration. And yes, there are, the dreaded B word, there is there is some application of that, but actually, there is something that we collectively have to admit as a profession, that we've got some work to do to help the Land Registry combat the backlogs as well, by actually having better quality of applications. And I think, what Ado has mentioned, it definitely matches the experience that we've sort of like had in terms of our own research with our customers, that there is probably, in terms of post-completion teams, there is kind of like low confidence level in the quality of the documentation that is being handed over to the post-completion teams. And again, that documentation is not down to the post-completion teams, it's down to the earlier work that was happening during the course of the transaction. So I think we definitely need to try to visit how we approach those processes. So, if I was to recommend to the law firms, how can they prepare for the changes, working in product, something like process mapping for me is a natural day-to-day tool. And actually that's probably where everybody really needs to go back to the drawing board. Map out your entire process where there are some touch points with the documentation that actually feeds in the Land Registry application. Look where the manual data entry points are. How do you facilitate the checks, whether the information goes in there how it should do? Do you have name variances between documents? And when we talk about something like name variances, we're not talking about just typos in people's names, although this does happen. We're also talking about things let's say on a transfer document, my name might be entered as Joanna King. On a mortgage deed, I might be Joanna Monica King. In the future, the software with the deed matching will start flagging these variances as an obvious error that will actually prevent the application from going through. So these are the things that we really need to start looking at as moving that kind of a quality assurance much earlier in the process. And I don't know, Simon might be able to sort of comment on this more, but a while back when the conveyancing protocol was updated, there was an introduction of the practice of exchanging the copy of the transfer document signed by the seller actually ahead of maybe exchange or definitely ahead of completion, just to check something like the execution clause. What I'm not certain is actually how much traction that introduction of the practice has had already, because that's definitely one of the things that we already should be facilitating that could actually ease spotting those mistakes much earlier in the process before the file gets handed over to the post-completion team.